So hi guys, I am Elaine si Meregildo of PCPET 17402A, and I am here to present Article 1305 to Article 1307. So the first article is Article 1305. A contract is a meeting of minds between two persons whereby one binds himself with respect to the other to give something or to render some service. So this article provides us the legal definition of a contract. Ina-emphasize niya yung meeting between two contracting parties that takes place when an offer by one party is accepted by the other. Also, to be able to fulfill the prestation to give, to do or not to do, the parties must bind themselves with respect to the other. So in a contract, there must be at least two persons or parties because it is impossible for one to contract with himself. For example, when Ben offers to sell his cake to Mona in the amount of 500 pesos and Mona agrees to the cost, there is a perfected contract of sale. So it is a contract because Mona agrees to the offer of Ben. So meron ng meeting of minds between two parties. So let's now move on to the termination or cancellation of pre-existing contract. So the first one is termination by stipulation of the parties. As a rule, the method of terminating a contract is primarily determined by the stipulation of the parties. So a contract can be terminated or cancelled when the two contrary parties both agreed on a certain condition or stipulation. The second one is the termination by stipulation at option of one party. A contract may provide, however, that it shall come to an end at the option of one or either of the parties, and such stipulation, when fairly entered into, will be enforced if not contrary to equity and good conscience. Same to number 1, but dito, sinasabi na at option of one party. So dapat fair at hindi nanlalamang sa other party. And there must be a valid reason to cancel or terminate the contract. So the last one is the termination by one party with conformity of the other, where one party opts to cancel an existing agreement and the other party expresses its conformity thereto and legal effect, the parties enter into another contract for the dissolution of the previous one, and they are bound by their contract. So here we can say na kapag yung isang party nag-decide na i-extinguish yung contract and the other party conform or pumayag, magkakaroon ng another contract para totally ma-dissolve or extinguish yung past and original contract. Distinctions between termination and rescission of a contract. A civil obligation is created when two parties agree on the performance of a moral or social obligation. There is an agreement but there is no contract. However, if the parties agree on the performance of a civil obligation, the result is a contract which is legally enforceable in the court. Contract and obligation distinguish. Contract is one of the sources of obligations. On the other hand, obligation is the legal tie, relation itself that exists after a contract has been entered to. It only says here that contract is one of the sources of the obligation. So, ano-ano nga ba yung sources of obligations? Meron tayong law, contracts, quasi-contracts, delicts, and quasi-delicts. While obligation is the legal tie itself. Also, there can be no contract if there is no obligation, but an obligation may exist without a contract. The next one is a contract and agreement distinguish. Contracts are agreements enforceable through legal proceedings. There can be no contract in the true sense in the absence of the element of agreement or of mutual assent of the parties. Dito naman sinasabi na contracts are all agreements but enforceable through legal proceedings, while not all agreements are contracts kasi mas broader yung agreements sa contracts. So, it means that there will be an agreement without the presence of a contract, but we can't make a contract if there is no agreement. So let's now proceed on the classifications of contract. The following may be mentioned according to name or designation. Nominate, with a special name such as pledge, barter, and lease. So itong mga contracts daw na to have their name, special name, or designation na binigay ang batas. Then the other one is the innominate, or contracts without any name. So itong mga contracts daw na to ay walang special name or designation of law. Number 2, according to perfection or formation. Consensual, perfected by mere consent such as sale and barter. So, this contract is perfected by mere agreement of the parties. For example, sale. So, nagbenta ako ng sasakyan kay Mary. And Mary said na bibilhin niya yung sasakyan. So, merong agreement na naganap sa aming dalawa. So, that is called consensual contract. So, next one is real, perfected by the delivery of the object of the contract, such as pledge, loan, and deposit. So, nape-perfect lang daw ang isang contract if na-deliver mo na yung object. So, for example, sa example ko kanina, binili ni Mary yung sasakyan na binibenta ko. So, for our contract to be perfect, kailangan ma-deliver ko sa kanya yung sasakyan. Then, once na ma-deliver ko na sa kanya yung sasakyan, so, mape-perfect na yung contract. So, the last one is formal or solemn. A contract which is formatted by satisfied all the essential formalities of a contract. So, this requires some particular form. For example, donation. So, there is a need of formal or writing kasi required siya by the law. Then, para maging valid din yung contract. And para ma-perfect yung contract. Number 3, according to cost or equivalent value of prestation. Onerous. There is an exchange of consideration such as sale, barter, and lease. So, dapat yung both parties ay may equivalent valuable consideration or meron silang interchange. Remunerative, contracts where one party gives something or renders service to another in consideration of a previous or past deeds of the other. So, pag ito naman, yung prestation is given for service na na-rendered previously. So, the last one is the gratuitous. There is no consideration received in exchange for what has been given, such as donation, remission, and comodato. So here, yung isang party ay walang matatanggap na equivalent or consideration, prestation, kasi binigay niya yon for free. Number 4, according to person obliged. Unilateral, where only one of parties is obliged to do something such as comodatum, gratuitous deposit, and gratuitous motum. So, dito naman sa unilateral, isa lamang sa parties ang may obligation. Pero, we must always remember na even if it's unilateral, the giving of consent is bilateral or still mutual. For example, nanghiram ako ng book sa kaklase ko. So, I have an obligation na ibalik yon afterwards. Bilateral, where both parties are obliged, give, or to do something such as sale, barter, and lease. So, both parties are obligated and both are required for the prestations. Example, sa sale. So, example ulit natin yung kanina. So, nagbenta ako ng sasakyan kay Mary. So, my obligation is to deliver the car to her, while her obligation to me is to make a payment or to pay me. So number 5, according to dependence to another contract. Preparatory. An agreement that is in anticipation of another subsequent contract that will supersede the terms of the earlier contract. B. Accessory. Its existence and validity is dependent upon another contract such as pledge, mortgage, and guarantee. Then letter C is principal. Can stand alone such as sale, barter, deposit, and loans. So the next article is Article 1306. The contracting parties may establish such stipulations, clauses, terms, and conditions as they may deem convenient, provided that they are not contrary to law, morals, good customs, public order, or public policy. So this provision talks about the freedom to stipulate or the principle of autonomy of contracts. Freedom to contract guaranteed. The freedom to contract is both a constitutional and statutory right. The right to enter into contracts is one of the liberties guaranteed to the individual by the Constitution. It also signifies or implies the right to choose with whom one desires to contract. So it only says that parties are free to stipulate and we can stipulate anything, but with limitations kasi contracts must be legal. And nabanggit nga sa Article 1306 na it must not be contrary to law, morals, etc. So there are limitations on contractual stipulations. So the first one is contract must not be contrary to law. A contract cannot be given effect if it is contrary to law because law is superior to contracts. So the next one is contract must not be contrary to morals. So morals deals with norms of good and right conduct evolved in a community. So the third one is contract must not be contrary to good customs. Customs consist of habits, practices which through long usage have been followed and enforced by society on some part of it as binding rules of conduct. So the fourth one is contract must not be contrary to public order. Public order refers principally to public safety, although it has been considered to mean also the public will. Then the last one is contract must not be contrary to public policy. Public policy is broader than public order, as the former may refer not only to public safety but also to considerations which are moved by the common good. So sabi nga kanina, may mga contract na mayroong special names and designation in law na mag-govern sa kanila, such as sales. But then, there are also contracts that are innominate. In Article 1307, it will provide the answer kung ano nga ba yung mag-govern sa kanila. Kasi dapat lahat ay mayroong mag-govern. So, Article 1307, innominate contract shall be regulated by the stipulation of the parties, by the provisions of Titles 1 and 2 of this book, by the rules governing the most analogous nominate contracts, and by the customs of the places. So here, makikita natin na merong binanggit na 4 na rules that will govern innominate contracts. So, una dito is the stipulations of the parties or agreement of the parties. Next one is the provisions of Titles 1 and 2 of this book. So, this is the provisions of Civil Code on Obligation and Contracts. The third one is by the rules governing the most analogous nominate contracts. So, analogous or most similar clauses to the nominate contracts. And the last one is by the customs of the places. So, kinds of innominate contract. They are, number 1, do ut des, or I give that you may give. Number 2, do ut facias, I give that you may do. Number 3, facio ut des, I do that you may give. And the last one is fascio aut fascias, or I do that you may do. Though this is, however, no longer a nominate contract because it has already been given a name of its own, namely barter or exchange. Reasons and basis for a nominate contract. Innominate contracts are based on the well-known principle that no one shall unjustly enrich himself at the expense of another. That will be all. Thank you for listening.